So for the next session, we have the topic for the session is marketing to the upmarket urban Indian. And for the same, we have as moderator Mr. J. Bhuva, partner Deloitte. For the panelists, we have Mr. Pavan R. Chawla, founder and editor, MediaBrief.com, Mr. Pawan Sarda, CMO and head of D2C Wing Greens, and Mr. Siddhesh Joglekar, Vice President, Marketing Byju's. I will request the panelists to please come on the stage. Meanwhile, I request everyone to please use the hashtag 18MarcOn. This is our 18th edition this year. Do show us your thoughts. Let us know what you think about whatever sessions you've been attending. Let us know your thoughts on the same. I would request the panelists, Mr. J. Bhuva from Deloitte, Mr. Pavan Chawla from Media Brief, Mr. Pawan Sarda from Wing Greens, and Mr. Siddhesh Joglekar from Byju's to please come on the stage. We've actually welcomed you already. Can we have a round of applause, please? Over to you, Jay.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. And this topic is very close to my heart, my profession, and I've got an amazing panelist here. So look forward to a very insightful session. Let me start by something that I read last week, which is about ChatGPT. And you might wonder, what's ChatGPT got to do with marketing anyhow? But a lot of marketeers today are exploring newer ways to reach out to the upmarket Indians. They believe that the technology, the stack, the MarTech is the ripe solution to reach out and understand the nuances, the preferences, and the context of these Indians. We would hear more about the perspective from the industry veterans. I firmly believe that authenticity of messaging, having purpose-led communication is very key. Take, for example, the Edelman Trust Survey from last year. Said 68% of consumers believe that they have the power to ask the brands to talk about their purpose. They can force the brand to talk about the purpose because otherwise they are not going to engage with them. 86% believe that the CEOs and CXOs must talk about it, not just in their internal communication, but externally in the brand messaging and in anything that they do with consumers. Now, how do we marry this two? One side, we have got this fundamentals of marketing, which says be authentic, have purpose, have communication with transparency with your consumers. And there's this huge AI-driven advancement which people are trusting, are thinking to trust, or they have already started to trust. So with that, if I can start with you, Siddhesh, what's your perspective? How do you think this is going to evolve? Has it changed? And how would it further change?
Yeah, I think great point overall. I think two aspects here. One is realize that the upmarket Indian, at least in the pre-COVID days, was also the influencer stroke early adopter. Now, obviously, in the post-COVID UPI kind of an era, the definition of the influencer and early adopters have also changed. But to me, an upmarket Indian is also an influencer and early adopter. So particularly for startups, attacking this segment is like critical to survival. Forget anything else, because these are the guys which are influencers in their own right. They will go and talk good things, hopefully, about a new product or a service. So yeah, so in fact, a story I can relate to is, when we started talking about Byju's, we talked about falling in love with learning back in 2015. And the attempt was to go to parents, which were sort of both parents working. They cannot, was a premium in terms of spending time with the child. And at that time, we talked about falling in love with learning. So, I would say, apart from AI and all the tech stuff, the differentiated communication is a big lever. to talk to the upmarket Indian. What are the needs of this upmarket Indian? You know, time is a real premium for all these guys. Apart from the fact that they have wallets to spend and all of that, I think time is a big premium. So, you know, for one learning for me was, how do I tailor my communication and cut through the riffraff and connect with the consumer on what their needs are. Back in the day in 2015, when we started off our marketing, we talked about come fall in love with learning. You know, back then education was all about creating a FOMO and all of that. You know, at that time, this communication line, you know, really worked for us in connecting with those early adopters, those influencers, so-called upmarket Indians, which are looking for something that can help their child in a constructive manner.
Fantastic. So great point. Creative communication, time sensitivity, and these are really the fundamentals. Pavan, what's your take?
Sorry. So I just want to first hark back on just one thing. Over the last, as Pawan Sarda was talking to me earlier, the last 500 years, exaggerating to make a point, the basics and fundamentals of marketing are the same. Whether you were on a bullock cart shouting through a megaphone, suno, suno, ye karo, wo karo, or with a pen and paper trying to take information and feedback from people one by one, and, you know, a brand was lucky if 70% of that was real authentic stuff and not just filled out. But today, so everything used to look at what? I want to find out what my target group and define the audience. My objective obviously is, let's say, business enhancement, customer acquisition, to oversimplify. And then I need to connect with my audience at their favorite hangout places. So whether it was a sports mela in the back of Beyond, or whether it is on their favorite hangout spots today on the internet. The point is that the only difference today, the constant thing is the content, as he said. The quality, authenticity, and relatability, and most important, relevance of the content without impinging upon and forcing it and making it getting familiar, right? So that balance is very important, and you enter the life of and the space of the target individual, which you can do today, which never used to happen in the past, right? An ad literally was like, a television ad was a spray and pray. Okay, in the days of Doordarshan, it was the whole of India was watching, ad chala do. Nobody would come back to you. Then we realized that, okay, there are different channels with different TGs, different kind of following, etc. So that kind of targeting started to happen. Then there were mediums with frequency like radio, mediums with reach like television, mediums with reach like national print, etc., etc. But the rules are the same. Where do you want to reach your audience? How do you want to reach them in the kind of content that they like? If you look at the recent research, Jay, globally, an average is that an upmarket person uses the internet and is on social and digital and the mobile, I mean, on social and digital through the mobile and internet for about 3 hours, and that's beyond his work or her work needs. So the point is to find out where they are and understand what they want and how to connect with them. There's another story I have, but maybe I can, okay, I'll just tell you a little more. On my podcast series on Media Brief, and I'm not plugging it, but it's just that I was blessed to have this amazing person called Dr. Duane Varan. He was the global head of Disney Media Research and Advertising Lab for about 7 years ago, he sort of gave that up, left, resigned. He's bought Al Capone's house in Chicago, by the way. That's the kind of crazy freak he is. And he's now in Australia with Media Labs. And what they do is, suppose there were 10 times the audience that there are there in this room, and this is really a pretty decent audience in any case, so thank you for being here. But, you know, when they wanted, marketers wanted some feedback and some qualitative and actual emotional response to be measured, okay? They put up a huge screen, there are 500 people watching, and then there are sensors which map every face. And with twitches and expressions and everything, they can actually record in half an hour what I liked, disliked, was moved by, was infuriated by, was inspired by, was whatever, across a multitude of, you know, responses that I give, and into 500, and in 30 minutes you would have that qualitative feedback, which was amazing, which would take maybe more than a year for one person to go across, individuals or 10 people to go across. So the point is that there is the technology here today which is available, Jay.
Fantastic.
And that really closes the loop beautifully. And going ahead, it's definitely AI and predictive and prescriptive analytics that's going to happen.
Thanks for sharing that story. And what I hear from you, rules are the same, but we have got vehicle which is allowing us to go fast with a lot of agility.
Yep.
Pawan, if I may request your views on this one. The content is still the king. Time, agility, and your ability to plug in all of these to reach out to Upmarket Indian. Do you see the acquisition and retention is different for Upmarket Indian versus the others?
Yeah, so first I want to talk about the brand purpose which you started with. So
Sure.
I just want to give my take on brand purpose. So many a times when people say brand purpose, it doesn't mean social purpose, right? Like as Siddhesh said that they wanted people to fall in love with education. It really comes from an insight, right? The fact that in India, education it's more intimidating. It's about, it's not the simplest way of teaching. I think that's their brand purpose. Or maybe a Nike, their brand purpose is to create athlete in everybody, right? That's the starting point, right? You have to really ensure that why are you here in the business? And it's a very business question and answer needs to be given. I think that brand purpose is extremely important. Number two is the audience, right? I think as the subject says that, the premium or the 1% of the customer can be a great influence. Yes, it can be because they are the one, if you attract first, they typically become an influencer for many more audience and categories and so on and so forth, right? I can give you my example of business which we run. Wingreens is really our brand purpose is really bringing farm to table, right? That's our brand purpose. We really want to cut out everything what comes in between and really want to give you as fresh as possible. So who's going to appreciate this? Obviously that 1% of India who's traveled, who's seen and so on. But do we want to end there? No. We want to cater to entire India, right? And that's why once the acceptability happens into this audience, now we need to go back and chase a slightly more wider audience. Having said this, that's the biggest challenge, having said this, right? So that's where I think a lot of it needs to be put from a communication point of view. What do you do? I think in today's context, you have so much. While there is so much of bombarding of, each one of you are on, I'm sure each one of you are busy on your phone even now, right? There is so much of communication which comes to you. So how do you create your story? That's why you have so many tools. You make it, personalization becomes a great piece of, important aspect from a marketer perspective. How do you achieve, and therefore content and the story, right? The content has to be right. I mean, what I'm talking to you, the brand cannot be talking to me in the same lens, right? And how do you differentiate? Maybe in today's context, people create cohorts, right? And then they say, okay, this cohort will maybe appeal to this. But I think technology is really helping us to create that massification in the most personalized way, but content, there is a role of content which needs to be right. If your pitch is not right, if you're not talking to the customer at the right time and the right way, then I don't think you will be able to scale, is what my view is. Yeah.
Great. So purpose is content is key, and obviously the technology is helping. I want to transition into a slightly more, not to put anybody on spot, but you're running an organization in CXO capacity, and CMOs traditionally used to be seen as a cost center. You spend a lot, and what's the return, right? CFOs always have this very nasty communication with all the CMOs that I've been working with, but I think that has been greatly changing, and today's CMOs are seen as orchestrator of, or somebody who is joining the dot across the organization. There are silos in the way revenue officers behave because their priorities are separate. CIOs and CDOs would want to have their data strategy defined in a particular way. You are really responsible to put the face in the market. Two questions. One, how are you able to communicate, and whether that strategy of yours is changing, of what metrics to measure the marketing's efficacy on? Last click online sale, I mean, where do you attribute? Are you seeing acceptability in the way organizations are looking at how the marketing should be run? Do you see there are challenges that organizations should proactively address, right? They should proactively address. Any example from your experience or your viewpoint for audience to plan and go forward, looking forward strategy? This is not looking rear mirror. This is looking forward. How should marketing leadership be looking at this aspect? Anybody who want to take the first shot?
Yeah, I'll take the first one in terms of how do you plan in such a in such a situation in terms of in a situation where the role of the CMO or the marketing office is getting expanded, from not just a cost center to an ROI center, as I would call it. I think measurability is making marketing even better, I would say. The fact that everything can be measured. For example, what is the impact of a TV ad? Maybe 10 years back, it was not getting measured. But today, it can be measured to some extent. For example, my friends at Swiggy, I'm sure they are tracking, their ads in IPL in ways that we cannot even imagine. The way they are doing stuff, So, and in an age of app downloads and in an age of instant orders and all of that, I think fundamentally, the fact that everything gets tracked, everything gets measured, is great. Yeah. How do you go about this? I think you go about this with the same rigor as a sales organization would do. I think marketing has to think more rigor, more analytics, more data, and taking data oriented decisions. I think has for sure increased as we make things more measurable, make things more trackable, as I would say. That said, you still have to talk to the consumer. Yes, everything can be, everything can be automated, everything can be done in a different way, but every consumer will be at a different stage of their thinking. A consumer who is probably in a third standard, with a third standard child, might have very different needs as in a 9th standard child. You still have to do right segmentation. You still have to talk to them in a different way. For example, an IB board child is looking at probably doing something very different after 12th compared to a CBSE board child. Yeah, so there would be, the role of segmentation, and that is where I think technology is playing a great role. Segmentation, cohorts, and doing custom communication to them, I think, has become much better in the last.
Great. So Siddhesh, I think what I
years.
hear is it's actually a good news for marketer that there is everything which is trackable. Yeah. It is allowing us to take data-driven decision, and maybe that allows you to play a role of a catalyst in the organization to drive that change. And maybe, with that, I'll request your view.
It was a lovely question, actually. The whole point is how do marketers navigate the changing landscape, right? And bring in first awareness, or let's say greater appreciation for their category of these people who actually are the sales managers for the sales teams of the company. And that is a crucial role. They are virtually the Grihalakshmi once removed, right? Just behind the salespeople. And people just tend to look at marketers and marketing as a big cost. But please remember that without this enabler, you are doomed and finished. Jungle mein mor nacha kisne dekha? Right? You have to tell the world and your cohorts, and you have to help the sales guys and your business to reach out. Now, the important thing is that you obviously need data, as you mentioned, and you need to evaluate. What are your CDPs? What is the relevance, and not relevance, okay, but what is the credibility of the CDP, the customer data platform, right? I mean, I'm not plugging ComScore here, but I would much rather, and there are many businesses that will say we have this kind of, traffic here and this kind of engagement, and is a 3-second view actually a video view? For God's sake, I don't think so, right? But and businesses will not let you look at their panels. The only ones I trust are the ones who say, here is my ComScore panel, come look at it, and you will know what I do. Even an online measurer of traffic is not able to actually, they guesstimate. They will give you the traffic for an entity or a company that you want to partner with or you are deploying for your programmatic or whatever, which is about 1/5 of the actual, right? I mean, we get 3.5 million 28 days web impressions for a B2B website. But when I go to one of the top 5, they'll say, oh, you got only about, 1/8 the number. Point I'm trying to make is that the relevance and the credibility of your CDP for the data is very important, because that helps you look back and look forward and plan. And another thing, very important thing that marketers need to deploy strongly and concentrate upon is A, innovation, and B, good sales people as an organization, right? So they have to sell not only outside but also within the company, right? Okay, it's not a sales function external for the marketers, but essentially a company, a brand that's in luxury needs to do that, and this needs to be done by every brand. I'll give you one small example. During COVID, when feet were not on the ground, and online retail, direct to retail was amazing. And there was this one entity that we partnered with, which is in the premium auto category, direct retail sales, okay, and passenger. And what they did was, when I go to a place, I want an immersive, I want even a tactical or a tactile kind of an experience. But on online, they created this peripheral kind of 360-degree experience. There were special videos made of giving people that allowed their visitors to look at under the hood, into the engine, on the wheels, kick the tires, below, above, inside, everything that was there. And that was literally like what you would experience when you go into a car. And then from there all the way till all the paperwork, if somebody wanted a bank kind of an assistance or not, including the documentation, everything. They sold very, very many cars during COVID. Okay, and all with digital signatures and beautifully done. What they would do was they would train their sales staff from morning during the working days till 6 p.m. and then reach out to the HNIs and say, and they've already set up that, sir, at 7:30 when you're free, he'll say, I'm free at 7:30, you can call me and then we will do this virtually. And they sold nearly as many as they did when feet were on the ground. So
How
that is an
remarkable.
amazing
Yeah.
thing.
Fantastic.
It's the kind of stuff we need to do. Really.
Thank you. Good points, Pawan. Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I think they have already said it all. Obviously, I think we are customer custodians, so we equally play a big role even at a P&L level. I've seen both world of marketing where we used to do a campaign, television campaign, and rest for 3 months, and sometimes didn't even know what the sales numbers are. Today, I think, as he rightly said, that the last mile attribution, or whatever you call it, we are sitting in the board and answering every question for the business. I think there's a big shift, and it's a good shift, if you ask me.
Great. So we spoke about purpose, we spoke about content, we spoke about technology and the agility it brings in. We also spoke about the new matrices and how they are enabling you to orchestrate and be a catalyst across the organization. The next question is around talent. What sort of talent would you need to deploy, to work within this function as marketing enters into the new age? We call this age of width. Deloitte suggests that we are soon going to be all in the age of width meaning AI and machines. How do we start trusting them more? Because it's only going to get better and better at what it is doing for us. What would you say that planning your task force to drive efficacy within marketing function, how would it look like? Would you want to change it? Or you see that the current construct of the marketing team will generally do fine? Siddhesh, or you want to go first?
I'll take a little stab at this. I was talking to the India brand head of Snapdeal, not a client, but he said something very nice. He says what happens whenever we have these big, large meetings of the marketing teams, there is a chorus of yes, 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 yes. Complete agreement one after the other. The junior most looks at the slightly senior person and okay, he wants to say this, let me stick with that. Let's play safe. He says, I break that all the time. And the most important thing he said, and I mean, I agree with this, I think it's reverse mentoring which is very important. You empower the youngsters to tell the senior people in age only and perhaps in designation that this is how the younger generation or this is how, is using devices and mobile devices and everything else and how it's remaining connected and what formats and what is useful and where does the credibility lie. So essentially, there is a lot of L&D that we need to do across whether, I don't know how many people, about 95% of marketers, young marketers I've spoken to, they know what programmatic sort of is. But when you ask them about brand safe environments, they'll say should not be on porn, should not be on bad sites. Very good. But at the same time, if your TG is not actually on a site which gives him or her that kind of stuff that he likes, you shouldn't be there too. Even that is brand unsafe, or at least it's business unfriendly and you're wasting your time. What about ad fraud? What about third-party cookies? What about first-party cookies? How do you tread that ground? What is your awareness level there? How do you empower your people? I know a PR agency that has put about 650 people through an upgrade digital marketing course which costs 1 lakh rupees per person. Why? Giving Kindles out to every junior account executive. Right? Why? Read and be empowered with knowledge. It's really the knowledge and the kind of space and atmosphere you give them as a work culture is what is going to keep them with you. Attrition is terrible. The kind of investment you make on each person, it has to come back into the system, and that will happen when they remain and they help you go forward.
Good point. And on lighter note, I think, Siddhesh, you're looking very happy. There's a big market for educating current workforce on digital marketing course. But what's your take? How should the talent look like for this marketing?
I think that's a great question. I would say, we have, in like 5-6 years, we have gone from data deficiency to data deluge. And yeah, I think today's marketer, I think one of the challenges, you have too many avenues to look at. It is very, very important to have focus. I think, focus, ability to experiment, ability to keep constantly challenging yourself, because what was growth in the last quarter has become baseline for this quarter. In a fast-changing environment that we live in. Yeah, I think very important that you have that growth mindset. I think for me, three things stand out. One is ability to focus, given so many things that are happening. Two is ability to do controlled experiments and deliver innovation. And third is the growth mindset. You should have that growth mindset and constantly challenging yourself to test limits. I think, those are the overall things in terms of attitude, and then obviously what Pavan talked about, in terms of skills and in terms of looking at different aspects, right from the ad brand safety to the last mile attribution and all of that. I think skills definitely are there, but I think that attitude is super critical.
Very insightful. I'm looking at the time here. We have last 1 minute left. Pawan, why don't you answer that? And as well, I request, leave the audience with one quote, one wisdom that would serve them well.
Yeah, two things, just from a previous point. I also feel that while we talk about the talent, I see the biggest problem, maybe problem or whatever, I don't know any other word to use, at a leadership level, right? Because I think they need to change more than the team. They need to have a very open mind. They need to adapt. They need to, as you rightly said, right, like, give a lot of empowerment or encourage their team, right? I think what's required is more at the top, to be honest, than at the bottom. I think that's one thing. Two is, just from one point which I want to leave is that, listen, marketing will never change. The game of marketing will never change. It's here. It will always remain the same because now we have so many jargons which comes in. Sometimes I feel that, that's really killing the base idea of marketing. हिंदी में बात करो, हिंदी में समझो, marketing समझ में आएगी और आप वो करो. That's my only advice to all you guys. Just be very basic. Nothing needs to be changed. All the tech stuff is to actually give you scale, personalization, all of it. It's not here to complicate you and your life.
Great. Thank you. How about you, Siddhesh? Why don't you give your one line, one wisdom quote?
Yeah, I think I agree. Keep things simple.
Keep things single.
Keep
Okay.
things simple is the mantra. I think too many new things have come up, but that's okay. At the end of the day, your CPA, CPO, whatever you call it, still remains the same. Your CPRP or equivalent still remains the same. How many people are you reaching out? Are your audiences relevant? The basics still remain the same. So yeah, keep it simple.
Awesome.
The one thing, the biggest differentiator and enabler today is what needs to be now the engine of the rest of all the beautiful essentials that you have mentioned. And that engine, I think, needs to be a three-bogey engine. Bogey number one has to be predictive analytics. Bogey number two has to be AI that looks at and understands and takes everything forward. And bogey number one, engine number one has to be prescriptive analytics going forward. So if we take AI and analytics in the prescriptive and the predictive stage, and I think, and get on to the cloud and ensure that we are safe across everything and not only add value to our company, but also do not, as marketers, bring it any harm in terms of any losses or whatever by transgressing some regulatory or whatever aspect, which the cloud will always throw up a red flag about. So we've got to be careful, and I think it's a cautious but also very optimistic end note. Go ahead with all these three: analytics, predictive and prescriptive, and AI.
Very, very insightful. Thank you very much. You have been an awesome panel. If I just summarize, the fundamentals and basics of marketing remain same. Look at the technology that is coming up with promise. Try and be the catalyst. As a marketer, a CMO can play a role of a catalyst. Join the dots across the organization to drive efficacy through content, personalization, and agility. Thank you very much for listening.
And if I may, thank you, Jay. You've been an amazing panelist, moderator rather. You brought out a lot of stuff and made it very interesting indeed. And thank you.